If there was a severe seasonal change like a drought, floods or continual rain, will that affect your business? Will it devastate your business? Are you prepared? Have you got a strategy in place for your lawn care business to get through it? G'day viewers, Jeff from McPhee's Gardening, Australia. When I started 4 decades ago, I fell for the trap of wasn't really prepared. We suffered a severe drought, and what happened is that I nearly lost the business because I didn't identify it was a drought. I put my head in the sand and I never did anything to get myself out of it, and we nearly lost the business until I finally woke up. In the lawn care industry, we are subject to seasonal changes. We are subject to nature. Droughts are one of the biggest things that really can kill our business. What happens with a drought? The grass dries up. You're working away and there's plenty of lawns to mow, there's plenty of grass, and all of a sudden the rain dries up, the hot weather sets in and there's no grass to mow. So those weekly, 2 weekly mows are starting to become 4, 6, 8 weekly mows. That's what happened to me 40 years ago. We had a long drought of 10 years. And it wasn't until I made some changes, which I'll talk about later in the video, that got us out of trouble. I see a lot of people, they put their head in the sand and don't look for the future, thinking there's plenty of work around. And all of a sudden, at the snap of the fingers, it's all gone, it's all dried up. In Melbourne at the moment, we've got a 60-year driest period we've ever had. There's a lot of green grass, but it's called winter green. If we don't get any rain over the spring and the early summer, we're not going to have much grass to mow after in the new year because it just can't survive. Farmers at the moment are really struggling. They're trying to buy in feed for their stock. And at the moment, because of the lack of feed available, they've had to buy it in from interstate, from other states of Australia. So it's really dire for our farmers in Australia. And of course, the other one is wet conditions. Wet conditions obviously can slow you up. It can put you away for a couple of weeks where you can't get out and mow because it's too wet. And if it's during warmer seasons, what happens is the grass grows so quick that you're spending 3-4 times as long to mow the grass, trying to catch up, and you're chasing that tail. And in the meantime, you're losing money, as with droughts. If you're not out there working every day and servicing your customers, the money's not coming in. And this is where a lot of businesses, over a period of time, when you have long-term droughts or weather events that affect you, it can really be a struggle. There is one positive thing in seasonal changes that I've found is storms. What happens with storms, branches come down, customers ring up and there's heaps of work because they want it all cleaned up. That's the positive out of seasonal changes, but it's the only one I can see over the years that I've experienced. Droughts and floods and wet weather can be really a problem if we don't address it, if we don't identify it. So how do we identify it's going to happen? Well, of course, droughts, you may be able to get some indication from the Weather Bureau where they'll predict the next year that's going to be dry. And what the important thing is to be able to plan for the future. Assume there is going to be a drought. Take necessary actions, and I'll discuss that further in the video. Storms, floods and wet weather, totally unpredictable. You're at the hands of the gods. There's not much you can do about it. Again, you need to have a strategy in place that when it does happen, you can then start doing something about it. Weather events are something that we can't control. Weather events is something that can break our business if we don't have things in place. It really, at the end of the day, of all my experience that I found, when I first started, I didn't do it, but over the years, there is one formula, that is a good customer. Target the right customer. During the droughts, and I've seen 3 or 4 over my career, one we had 10 years of, the customers I had were fantastic. They understood the cycle of work. In other words, in spring and summer, the work was prolific. There was lots of work. When the drought kicked in, the grass started to dry up, and they still wanted our services. And what I learnt over that period was that they didn't want us to go away. So that's when we diversify, of course. When you've got a drought and there's no grass, you've got to diversify to survive. But a lot of the customers that I had we provided some alternatives. Prepare for the future. Prepare by lawn care treatments. Wetter soil. Get that water into the ground so when it does rain. Fertilisation. If you're lucky, irrigation. A lot of mine are irrigated, a lot are not. Now, that's not going to happen to everybody, of course, but it's important to try to get the customer in your stable. There's going to be a lot of customers when there's a drought, and you've been doing it weekly or 2 weekly. Oh, look, it doesn't need doing. Come back next time. 3 or 4 weeks go. Oh, it doesn't really need doing. When that happened at the time, and I did have customers like that, of course, they're going to go on the drop list. You're going to you can't get rid of them because you haven't got many customers. You're starting to lose the work, so you need as much work as you can. But when the work comes good, you know who's going to go on the bottom, who's going to go on the drop list. When I quoted all these lawns when I started with, and I knew the possibility of a drought in the future, I'd explain to the customer the quote is based on 26 cuts or 50 cuts a year or whatever the cycle's going to be. And from there, the customer understood what their budget was going to be for the year. Now, when it did come to a severe drought, we would offer other services in lieu of the lawn mowing if there wasn't nothing to mow at all. But generally, there would be daisies popping up in the lawn. There would be leaves that need sucking up with a mower. There would always be something. We did have 1 year where it was just absolute dust. You just couldn't do nothing about it apart from perhaps rake over the lawn to make it look nice. But at least it was income. At least we were still providing that service to the customer, and the good customers would look after us. The bad ones, well, we know what happens to them. They don't care. They don't really worry about you. But it's important for you to understand if you can know when it's coming to take some action. Of course, the secret is to have a backup in funds, emergency funds. And it's impossible when you're starting out and you're the sole income and you're trying to get the bank balance up. But you have to do it. You have to put something away for emergencies. Look, the people in other countries in England and America where they have winter times where it's just completely snowed under and they can't do any work, they obviously have to put away money for the winter periods. And we're no different in Australia. We should put away to help out when we do have these disasters. It may not happen in your area. You might be in a great area where you don't have any of that problems. And I hope there is no drought this year. But the signs are there. In Melbourne, they're there. And it's something that you need to prepare yourself for. And wherever you are in the world, whatever there is always going to be some disaster. And in our business, we always hit pretty hard with it. And we have to accept it. We have to identify with it. And we have to make sure that our equipment, our safety aspects are all up to scratch. It's so important to have all those, drought conditions are really, horrendous on filters, on mowers and dust and, all those things. You have to be careful and make sure your maintenance is to higher standards. I think the secret is just to identify when these things can happen, or a rough idea, have a strategy in place, have an emergency fund if you can. And I know it's all right for Jeff to say that. Look, sometimes when I started, I didn't have that emergency fund. That's why we nearly fell over. That's why during that drought, I turned to diversify my business, diversify what I wanted to do. In fact, I think I did a day a week doing something else completely out of gardening. I went back to do some consultancy just to put money on the table. There's always a way to get around this. If you want to stay in it for the long term, just prepare yourself. Viewers, thanks for watching. Please comment. Have you been through droughts, wet weather, floods? Let me know. I'd like to hear your story too. We'll see you on the next video. Thank you. Bye.